Hey, I'm your host and human design guide, Samantha Zagar, and you're listening to A New Narrative. This is my podcast where I tell personal stories, riff on source material, and interview guests. Let's get started. Hello and welcome. This is the third time in the last 5 minutes I have tried to start this podcast episode. I absolutely thought that today's episode would be easy. I totally thought it would be easy. I thought that I would just sit here and process. But part of the problem with processing verbally, live time, it has gaps. I'm stumbling. I am trying to put certain pieces together in a way that is not only supportive to myself, but in a way that is supportive to you as the listener. So, that's a strategy I'm trying to come up with right now is how do I say all the things that feel important for me to say in a way that feels best for me? I'm here for me. My podcast is my processing place. My podcast is probably my most personal place ever. I say things on my podcast that I don't directly say to my partner or my parents or my best friends. Like I create this illusion that I'm alone in my studio right now talking to the wall, and it's safe for me to let anything out. And then I publish it and I make it public and you listen to it. And I'm aware of you as the listener. This isn't just a processing place for me. It's also a supportive place for you. So who's going to be supported by this episode? Anybody with leftness. Anybody with an active brain. Anybody with an active body. Anybody with a strategic mind or focus view. If you share some of those elements with me, you're going to hear me talk about how they feel for me. Now, the interesting thing is, we can't really talk about something in a concrete way if it's going to be affected by something else. I can talk about what it feels like to have an active brain, but my experience of an active brain is in a quad left configuration. You might have an active brain, but maybe all the rest of you is right. How does your active brain feel differently when it's partnered with 3 parts right? So everything that I'm going to talk about, I don't want anybody to hear this conversation and think that I am like teaching or reiterating direct source material. Now, all of my learning about my variable comes from source material. But like I just said, just because I read something about an active brain, the experience of how that feels for me has a lot to do with everything else that it's been partnered with. I imagine being quad left feels a certain way, but then being quad left paired with, an undefined head and an undefined root, which makes the person with this body graph very susceptible to pressure, stress, and anxiety. I imagine that compounds a lot of quad left problems. And I can imagine that because that's my situation. I want to talk about the points system that I came up with because I really loved it. I found it very, very helpful for me, very regulating for me, very structuring for me. And my psychiatrist really liked it too. So I'm going to give a very, very basic, let's catch you up kind of backstory. When I started to travel in May of last year, that's when I started to learn how anxious and nervous and overwhelmed I get with traveling. I wish that I could come up with reasons. I have definitely spent a lot of time trying to come up with reasons. Is it lack of experience? Is it fear of separation from Maven? Is it catastrophic thinking in my openness? Is it mental health that needs someone to help me? Is it do I not like being around so much sacral energy when I'm traveling? Do I really not like absorbing so much frustrated sacral energy when I'm traveling? Like, there are so many. There's my undefined head. Question. But whatever the answer is, it doesn't change the fact that it's really uncomfortable for me to go through that experience. And so when I'm looking for support to make it more comfortable to go through that experience, what I really landed on were, I want to call them aids, because I don't want to say it's just like pills, but whether it's marijuana or a prescribed anti-anxiety, calmer, relaxer, whatever it is, God forbid, all I can find is like a lavender roll-on for an essential oil calmer. Like, I'm going to look for anything that's going to help me feel more regulated in that situation. That got me to talk to a doctor about how I felt unregulated. But a family doctor could only do so much for me. So he gave me a referral to a psychiatrist. And then a really terrible thing happened where I saw this psychiatrist, and I didn't even actually see him. It was a phone call appointment. It was incredibly brief. It was with a man, and there were so many red flags in this conversation. Like, there were more flags. There were more red flags in this than in the last season of Too Hot to Handle. Like, it was wild. Anyway, I cannot tangentially go down how terrible that was. So I just consistently... No, I do have to say how terrible it was for a reason. He labeled me. He didn't listen to me. I actively said, I do not have these things and do not feel this way. And he completely did not listen to me, projected onto me, and prescribed me things that, honestly, I think just made him feel good to prescribe them. Whether he gets a financial kickback or what, I don't know. But he described me in a really aggressive antidepressant, even though I very specifically said I am not depressed. I'm not depressed. I did need help sleeping, and I wanted to smoke less weed, so I needed some kind of sedative. He gave me a sedative. It helped. It did help me sleep. It really would just knock me out if I took it. It was not anything that was going to help with anxiety or panic attacks, because it doesn't calm you. It literally makes you, like, unconscious. It knocked me out. So it helped me catch up on a lot of sleep. Now, I took the sedative for casually pretty long time, quite a few months. However, the antidepressant that he prescribed to me, I took one pill. It absolutely wrecked me for 2.5 days. And I vowed never to take anything like that again, never to meet with that doctor again. It was absolutely terrible. Instead of, like, finally getting to the place of asking for help and then being totally unheard, projected on, given the wrong everything, it was a terrible experience. It was a really terrible experience. And so I asked for a referral from my family doctor to a different psychiatrist. I even tried to find one privately. I couldn't. He gave me a referral to another one. Her name, important here for me. Her name is Dr. Blair. And so many months went by and I never heard from the doctor. Nobody called me. I figured they just forgot about me. And then I did get a phone call and they booked me a couple months out. So this psychiatrist is so busy. It took me 9 months to get an appointment. And so we had our first appointment about 5 weeks ago. When we had our first appointment, it was really important to me that it didn't turn out the way that it did with the first psychiatrist. So I really, really aggressively had to go to bat for myself by saying things like, I am not depressed. I do not want an antidepressant. I am not anxious because I have trauma that, I went to therapy for trauma for a long time. We're talking like a decade at least. Like, I really do not need to continue to sit in a therapist's office and talk about things that were uncomfortable or that hurt in my childhood. And it honestly would make me really angry to think that basic, that was supposed to be the solution to my problem. It's not the solution to my problem. The one thing that I tried to tell the first psychiatrist was how I experienced time. You know, people are talking about emotions, they're talking about trauma, they're talking about your nervous system, they're talking about like how you feel. But I didn't want to talk about how I felt. How I felt didn't seem to be the big problem. A lot of it, all I could really say was that I knew it had something to do with time. And I think part of what I was grabbing at there was it had something to do with attention, focus, productivity, bandwidth. But it really was just being, you know, all packaged together in this concept of time. And so when I saw Dr. Blair, I really felt the need to emphasize time. And she said, of all the things I said to her, this is the thing that stood out the most. I love my brain. I love my brain. I love the way that I think. I love the way that I process information. It is beautiful to me to spend time in my brain. I need to understand it better, and I need to support it. I don't want to turn it off. I don't want to medicate it. I don't want to numb it. I want to know how to use it, and how to use it in a way that feels really good. I don't talk about my feelings in terms of emotions. I talk about my feelings, honestly, in terms of like pain or not pain, in how it feels to like execute something. And that leads me into this understanding about part of what's getting my focus and attention within my work in human design. You know, my work in, let's not even call it human design. A lot of people think that what I do is coaching. Now, if I look at the coaching industry, a lot of what people are selling in terms of what they're going to coach you through is how to be more successful in your business, how to be better in your relationship. Like, let's say, have more love and harmony and less love or less fights and turmoil, you know? So there's relationship coaching, there's personal development coaching, there's business coaching, there's a lot of what people are trying to sell to you is a pathway to a destination, and this destination is marked by some status thing. Let's say you get the house, you get the car, you get the partner, you get the thing that represents like what you were striving for. But most of us are aware that there are people on the planet who have their status things, they've accomplished their thingy, but they don't like their life. They don't feel good. You know, within human design, it's like, well, are they experiencing their signature? You know, maybe you got the house and the car, but it didn't satisfy you. I'm taking a pause. I'm gonna have a sip of my coffee. I have to let my brain catch up with my mouth, or my mouth catch up with my brain. One of the two. Hold a moment, please. Okay, if you arrive at the end of the line where you acquire the thing that you think was what you were after, I still have this question of, how does it feel to be in your brain while you have that thing? You know, let's say that you finally call in, you know, you manifest. A lot of people are trying to sell you manifestation, which is a way of saying that the destination is acquiring a thing, as opposed to how you feel about yourself when you get there. Let's say that, you know, my success, I think, is marked by paying my bills, having my home, I have a child that I wanted to have, I'm in a relationship. Like, these things in theory are the things that you think make your mind feel good. You know, I don't have to worry about not finding love, or I don't have to worry about getting the money. And I can see how this is supposed to make us feel good. But for myself, I have acquired a lot of these things, and I have accomplished a lot of these things, and I'm still wanting for something. I'm still struggling a little bit. And what I'm struggling with and what I'm wanting for is to understand how I work And I don't mean like the work that I do, but I mean like how I function. You know, how you work, how you function. The mechanics of human design are absolutely perfect for describing functioning. But I find that there is certainly a struggle of understanding how you put multiple parts together and how they function as a quantum or a holistic. Like I said, you can learn about an active brain, but it's going to mean different things when it's partnered with different things. Like an active brain is an active brain, but your perception of how one affects the whole is influenced by what the other parts are. I have noticed that the more that I've paid attention to how to support my own functioning, the more I have clients asking for support with functioning. I didn't make this content for anybody else, but I recently made, tripping over my words there, Sam. I recently made content about what I called my point system. Now, my point system is interesting in that I'm not trying to hit a certain number of points. I'm actually trying not to hit a certain number of points. Especially if you have an undefined root center like I do, you know, the pressure to be free, the pressure to complete the to-do list, get all your tasks done so you can be free of the pressure. Well, we know that the irony of this pressure is that you're never free of it. As soon as a task list is done, there's something else that can be on it. If you wake up in the morning with an undefined root center, you may wake up with this sense of pressure that's like, I have to get 100 things done now. I'm someone who can wake up that way, and it can be really hard for me to hold focus on a lot of different tasks and awareness on a lot of different tasks that need to be done. So in order to support myself, you know, knowing that I have a hard time being aware of all of the things that there are to be done, I decided to write them all down. And the first thing that I did was write it all in Canva. I love Canva. I love graphic design. And so I started coming up with like groups of things. I broke everything down into thematics. So maybe one was business development. Another one was like self-care. Another one was whatever. And within those topics, I tried to think about what are the things that I naturally do that fit under this category. Now that's where it started, and I met resistance when I couldn't move the items around. I didn't necessarily want to have to open up my laptop to see it. I didn't want to have to put it onto my second bigger screen to see it big enough. I couldn't move things around fast enough to reorganize things, and so I went very old school, and I wrote each one of these little tiny things that require energy, attention, focus. I wrote them down, and I cut them up. And then after I had almost like tiny flashcards. Now, things on my list are not necessarily what you would expect to be on a list. A lot of the times people are putting to-dos on their list, and it's based on what they want to get done, have to get done, or need to get done. I can tell you as a third line, unexpected fuck-ups are a part of my everyday life. I can also tell you they can be exhausting, they can be wildly inefficient, they can take a ton of focus and energy, and usually if I messed it up, it's because I already didn't know what I was doing. Then I messed it up, so I not only didn't know what I was doing, I also didn't know how I messed it up or how to fix it again after that. And so on my list of things that take energy, attention, and focus from me, I put things that might be perceived as accidents or negatives, because when they happen, I want to be honest that they took energy from me. So I have a task item or whatever that says unexpected fuck up. It's worth 3 points because I only want to move through so many points in a day. Let's say that being realistic with myself as a non-energy type and a projector, let's say that 20 points, every time I rearrange all of these items to equal 20 points, it shows me a volume of work or tasks or productivity that I feel good about. I feel like I haven't overdone it and I haven't underdone it. It feels reasonable. There are big 3-pointers. 3-pointers are things that take up a lot of bandwidth. Now, I love to do 3-point things early in the day. And I know that I like to do that because of my undefined root center. If I'm only looking to spend about 20 points in a day, if I can spend, 10 of them before 10 a.m., what that does is it creates this feeling of spaciousness in the rest of my day where I can have my focus be more naturally grabbed and I don't feel this sense of pressure so much, because once I hit that 20 points, I tell my root center to go take a hike. It can be like, there's more to do. And I'm like, no, we've done enough. Here's the proof. Here's the proof that we have done enough. Shh. Enough of that, root center. Things that take 3 points for me are record a podcast, like now. Record a YouTube. Go on a family adventure. Get into an argument. Be intimate. Do at least an hour of, do a big ballet thing. I actually don't have timelines around this. It's like ballet. Ballet is going to be a 3-pointer. I'm going to be so happy with myself when I'm done my ballet. And then one cool thing I started to do was, all right, Sam, let's be efficient. This was me creating a system. And as I'm creating it, I already have the projector awareness of how I can refine it, how I can make it more efficient. So I learned to stack points. And, the funny thing is, I could get a lot more points in the day without necessarily losing more energy if I was more efficient in what I was doing. So I learned that I could, do a ballet video while listening to an audio lecture while having a face mask on. And so that's 7 points for 1 hour of activity, because I get 2 points for doing a face mask and I get 2 points for listening to a lecture. And, listening to a lecture gets me points under system development, and face mask gets me points under self-care, and ballet gets me points under so many different things. Anybody listening to this podcast right now, if you are not a very left person, if you're a much more right variable person, it is really obvious to you right now how left I am. It's probably even giving you know what? You might not even want to listen to this podcast episode. Maybe they already deked out. Maybe receptive people are like, nope, this is way too strategic. It's just too left for me. This is the right nightmare. And it's my dream. What feels really good for me is going to feel absolutely disastrous for them. Hold on, let me recalibrate, refocus. This is part of it, right? I have to refocus. I have a list of a couple of words in front of me just to have some very basic, oh, yep, I did acknowledge this. Oh, yep, I did touch on this. Oh, no, we haven't talked about this yet. Going to the new psychiatrist, the possible diagnosis, and whatever. The possible titles or labels they were going to give me ranged from OCD, bipolar, anxious, depressed, ADHD, and just normal and traumatized. And you need to go talk to somebody. In the last meeting with the psychiatrist, a very important question for me was, is ADHD something that you either test yes or no for? Is there a genetic marker for this where they're like, yeah, you have it? Is there a blood type for this? Is there and I know that there's not a blood type for ADHD, but that's what I'm like, where is the scientific validation of yes, you have this, or no, you don't have this? Or is ADHD a cluster of symptoms? And she answered me that it was a cluster of symptoms. Now, based on the conversations her and I have had, based on the paperwork she's gotten me to fill out, based on the points method that I showed her yesterday, and a variety, the ways that I have coped with this throughout my life, the ways that it affected me being in school, by the end of yesterday's session, we're quite comfortably landed on very high functioning ADHD. And part of what she explained to me was there is a type of ADHD that is very, very low functioning, has a hard time focusing, has a hard time doing projects, has a hard time, like they need help to get their attention going. And then there's the kind of opposite end where you can really hyper focus, you can be very productive, you can move through a lot of different things. It's, basically where I fall on this spectrum is quite obvious. I fall into the high functioning side. I fall into the hyper focus side. I have fallen into like focus states, especially editing for YouTube, where I start at 10 a.m. in the morning, I go till 10 o'clock at night, and I wake up at 5 o'clock the next morning, and I go until noon the next day. And coming out of a focus like that is really disorienting. Disorienting? Whatever the right word is there. Coming out of that really extreme focus feels weird. Feels super weird. And when I've used that much of my focus, my brain is truly, genuinely tired. Now, when my brain is tired, I have a bit of a problem where my body isn't necessarily tired. And so, active brain, active body. I can exhaust that active brain. I can pull so much focus from it that the brain goes, all right, I'm done. I need to turn off. I need to be mindless. I need to be nourished. I need to have fun. I need to laugh. I need to just not have to do any type of active thinking. But it's in this body that is an active body. So my environment variable points left. Active body, meant to be observed. So even when my brain is totally exhausted, I can come out of a borderline 2-day focus flow. And while I think what I should be doing is going to rest, I'm sold rest in a way that says rest is very passive. Rest is like laying there. Rest is really not doing anything so that you can regain your energy back. I'm not a rest person. I'm a restless person. And that was really challenging for me to try and make sense of in my mind when I learned what a projector was. Being a projector, we're told that we're non-energy types. Okay, so that creates a narrative that says I don't have energy. And what it really means is I do not have consistent sacral life force energy. I am not a generator type. And I am not a manifestor with this motor to throat that has this cyclical energy. I'm a non-energy type. Okay, so tier 1, non-energy type. Great. Now let's throw in the next level of confusion for this and give me a motor. I'm a projector with an ego. That ego. And the ego lives in the body. My ego is in my design. It is unconscious. So when I'm looking at my design, I'm looking at my body. Active brain, active body, defined spleen, defined ego. So you've got this body that wants to be busy in activity. It doesn't necessarily mean like I'm hardcore working out all the time, but it means I'm very easily brought into activity when I'm in the right environment. My home, so market's internal, my home is my environment, and I am a complete busybody within my environment. Whether I am gardening or working or doing ballet or cleaning or like I have literally always just called it puttering. In fact, it's kind of my favorite thing to do ever. It's the thing that feels the best for my functioning. The thing that feels the best for my functioning is what I have always perceived throughout my life to just be this thing called puttering. And what it means for me is being allowed to move freely in my space, stop when something grabs my focus, and very naturally flow from one thing to the next. But puttering has also had these elements to it that aren't necessarily like related to what puttering is. They're related to me enjoying the experience. So I don't like other people around when I'm doing this. I don't like other people around because, one, the irony, I don't want to be watched. I don't want to be observed in my activity. I just want to do my thing. Because when people are observing me in my activity, they're going to comment on it. They're going to have an opinion. That's going to lead to a conversation. That's going to lead to me questioning if I'm doing what I'm doing right. And then that takes me out of my innocence because it will pull me into this desire that says I'm supposed to putter like this, so that like it all gets so mucky so quickly. I don't want to be pulled into response mode. When I putter, I like to be alone. And so part of what I recognize there is that functioning naturally for me is the easiest when I'm alone. Okay, now I'm going to call puttering something else that a lot of you will be able to relate to, because I've talked about this before and a lot of people relate to it. Hurricane cleaning. I call it hurricane cleaning because the way that I have always cleaned my house is to go from one thing to the next, one thing to the next. Let's say I carry laundry to Maven's room, and then I grab a dish and I take it to the kitchen, and then I take an old dishcloth and I put it in the laundry, and then I switch over a load, and then I take something off the washing machine and I put it away in the shed, and then I organize a bin in the shed, and when I walk from the shed back to the house, I have to cross the deck, and the furniture isn't lined up the right way. So then you see what I mean here? That's not how everybody cleans their house. It's just the way that I've always cleaned my house. But when you find out your quad left, and the way that your quad left presents is a way that is typically looked at as diagnosable for ADHD, suddenly hurricane cleaning, just, you see it kind of for what it is, which is wildly distracted cleaning. I am someone who will be like, I'm going to feed the dogs, and I'll put on a kettle of water because I like to mix hot water with their kibble. But while I'm thinking about cleaning the dogs, that hurricane thing happens, and the next thing I know, 25 minutes has gone by and the dogs are looking at me like, you were supposed to feed us. And I'm like, I'm getting there. I'm sorry. I really like to hurricane clean because I like to have a clean house. I like to have an organized house. And the funny thing is, it's not actually about, it's not particularly about like the germiness or the hygienic. Man, I'm really like playing with words today. Is this the right version of this word, or is this the right version of this word? I have a defined spleen. I really am not super picky about dust and germs. What I care about is distraction. I care that the surfaces aren't bothersome to me, that they don't pull me out of a focus. If I wake up in the morning and the house isn't tidied, like there are things from each room in each room, it just doesn't give me the same kind of clarity, the same kind of ease. Like, that's waking up and meeting resistance right away, because my brain isn't going to make things easy for me unless I can reduce the clutter. Like, clutter in my living space is clutter in my mental space. And that's also kind of a funny thing to think about as a markets person. Markets people, they like their stuff and their favorite stuff right nearby, very accessible, basically out on display. Right now, from where I'm sitting in the studio, you know, there's a pen, a coffee cup, like room spray, a hand cream, a lip chap. Like, there are certain things that make me feel good, feel regulated, and most of them are within reach. But they're not like just dumped there. They're either organized in a little bin or they're set up in like a perfect line that, you know, goes from large to small or wide to skinny or, you know, red to blue. Like, it's very, very, very organized. The more organized my life is, the easier it is for me to mentally function. I want to talk about marijuana a little bit, because if you're someone, you know what, you might not use marijuana because of the assumptions that you have about it. And you might use marijuana and still have a lot of assumptions, not about the plant, but about why you partake in it. I have been someone who has smoked weed almost daily since I was 17 years old. I take little breaks. In fact, usually the main reason I have taken breaks is because I start to stumble over my words too much. I'll get a point where it's quite hard to get the right word to come out of my mouth. It feels choppy, it feels stumbly, I just start to feel really like I'm gapping a lot. I feel like an airhead. And then I'll go, okay, you know, you need to get some clarity back. You probably smoked too much weed for too long. And so I'll take a break and I'll get my clarity back. And then while I'm not smoking weed and I do have this clarity, one of the things that I find is in that clarity, there's a lot more. It almost feels like there's more space to take things in, which you might think is a good thing. I might think it's a good thing. But then as I start to bring in more things, I'm like, whoa, this is overwhelming. This is overstimulating. I actually don't want this much clarity. I don't want this much space, because things just rush in to fill it. And so sometimes when I smoke weed, it's almost like it puts this like padding around everything that I'm already thinking. And it kind of like, they're like cotton balls. Like, they fill up the space reserves in my head. And usually when they fill up those little, it's such an awkward thing to describe, because sometimes weed is so good for me and sometimes it's really not. And it's not as simple as weed. Like, again, the details of things are really important. Smoking a sativa and smoking an indica have very different effects on me. If I'm in a productive place, like if I'm editing a YouTube video, I absolutely love to be stoned. I love to smoke weed and I love to smoke sativa, because sativa is going to keep me perky awake, but really help me like drill into something creative but focused. Whereas, you know, first thing in the morning when I wake up, I don't want to be stoned. I'm not stoned right now, you know. I'm not, and here's another thing. I'm going to record a podcast episode right now, but I'm not going to smoke weed before I record this podcast episode, because it would be harder to have clarity on what I want to talk about. And the actual physical effect of the weed drying out my throat would change my voice, would make me thirstier, would distract me more. Like, marijuana is not supportive to my functioning in this moment on this task. You know, I go through a huge chunk of my day sober. But then, you know, let's say I got my session out of the way this morning, there's 3 points. I record this podcast, there's 3 points. I'm going to do another session after this podcast, there's 3 points. I've already done a handful of smaller things when I first got up this morning, so I know I'm already over 10 points today. When I am done 2 sessions in the podcast, that is like the highest functioning, highest productivity that I needed to get out of me today. So then beyond that, I get to ask myself, like, do you want to change your mental state and play with this a little bit differently? Do you want to tap into a different kind of creativity? Do you want to? So maybe I have sativa dominant marijuana while I'm in the midpoint of the day. Maybe I have a sativa hoot and then I go for a bike ride and I listen to an audio lecture. But there's going to come a point in the day where I kind of want to just not turn it off. You can't turn off my brain. But I want to slow it down. I want to stretch it out. I don't want anything heavy, you know? And that's when I'm going to switch into an indica. And what the indica is going to do is it's going to help me relax. It's going to change my breathing. It's going to calm me. It's going to get me to do things like stretch, lay down, really start to decompress before bedtime. And then there's going to be a point where I've decompressed enough before bedtime and the indica is heavy, like sedating enough that I'm going to naturally just start to pass out. And that's when I'm going to go to bed. So I have learned at this point now that most of my relationship with marijuana is based around my functioning. Now, when it's around my functioning, I'm smart enough about this to use it in supportive ways. It feels like medicine. When I think about marijuana from a coping place or an emotional place, I can very easily talk down to myself about why I'm doing it. If I'm projecting onto myself about different reasons as opposed to the real reason, like, let's say I used to get overwhelmed by the neighborhood kids and then go have a hoot. I can recognize that as like, Sam, you're trying to cope because you're overwhelmed. And I can still totally fit that into quad left functioning and ADHD functioning. But it didn't feel good to do it for those reasons. You know, it felt like I was overwhelmed and I didn't know how to get out of it and I didn't know what to do for support. So I did like the closest thing that I could think of, which wasn't actually the best thing for me. You know, likely when I'm overwhelmed with all of the neighborhood kids, I need to do certain things like ask for some time alone, ask them to leave, let them know that I won't be answering yes or no questions, let them know that I won't be just volunteering to do like work or energy related things for them. Like there's so many ways that I can learn to support myself rather than just trying to numb out with weed. And also, numbing out with weed isn't a totally bad thing. The point that I'm getting at is understanding why, when it's appropriate, why it's relevant, is it supportive or not. Like, being more specific about it is very, very helpful rather than just giving a blanket statement as like, it's good or bad, and I do or don't do it. Good or bad and I do or don't do it has never worked for me because that's not supportive to me and it wasn't addressing why I was accessing it in the first place. Time for another little coffee sip. This is intended to be a very long podcast episode. A couple reasons why it's meant to be long is because I have already recorded 64 minutes of video content. Like, don't get me wrong, I can edit that video content. It's just me, point of view on a hike. I can totally eliminate 20 minutes of that. But I have 64 minutes of it. So I can speak for up to 64 minutes here and know that it is being paired with a really nice visual. The other point in why I wanted to talk for such a long period of time was to really empty out. Yesterday was a very, very big day because I had the second psychiatrist meeting relatively early in the morning, And as soon as I got into the room and started sharing like the point system and what worked about the paperwork and what didn't and all these other things, I started to get emotional. And she asked, what about this conversation was bringing up the emotions for me? And it's so interesting, like, if my mind had assumed she would ask me that, it would have come up with a bunch of different answers. But I actually wasn't expecting her to ask me that. And so when she asked me, I was a little bit surprised by what naturally came out. What naturally came out was, I didn't realize I was like this. I didn't realize I was this way because I kept calling it other things. I have always seen myself as bright and intelligent. My teachers have seen me this way, and my family has seen me this way. I am seen as bright, intelligent, and totally fucking normal. And I think I took normal way too far, because what I was a perfectionist. And there's no was. What I am has a lot of perfectionist tendencies. I have looked to make people proud of me by being intelligent. I was very, 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 very smart in regular school. When I was in grade 3, I was put into an advanced education program. In grade 3, I remember actively working on grade 7 curriculum. When I was in grade 5, I was by far like the definition of teacher's pet. I would stay late after school, ask for extracurricular projects, and I'd get extra credit. I was the same in grade 6. I was a really, really, really motivated kid in terms of intelligence. My vocabulary was really great at a young age. Some of the first books that I ever learned to read were Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes has a lot of really big words in it. So my mom also gave me a dictionary. And she said whenever I came to a word I didn't understand, look it up. So that improved my vocabulary very quickly. Now, here is wicked punishment for a projector. I love this. This is probably one of the most clever things my mom ever did for me that actually really does feel kind of recognizing. Is when my mom would ground me as a little kid, because I would get into trouble. She would make me write book reports. And she had bought me a whole old school encyclopedia set. So some of my first books was an A to Z encyclopedia set. And she would pick a topic, and I would have to search in my encyclopedias, hello original Google, and I would have to write a book report. So, like, she would let's say I'm grounded for a week. Or you can be done your grounding when you're done your book report. Obviously, I'm done the book report very soon. So when I look back in time, and the reason that it was relevant for me to look back in time was, well, the psychiatrist said that ADHD is a cluster of symptoms. It's also not something that is developed in adulthood. So whatever this cluster of symptoms is, they needed to be there when you were a child. And I would have never looked at how I was as a child as somebody who might actually fall into the category of a learning disability. I definitely related to being understimulated. I needed more work. When we had to take a testing class, historically, I have always been either first or top 2 in completing a test in a classroom. And then I sit there like, why does everybody else take so long? And then I get a little anxious, like, well, these people are going over their answers. Maybe I should go over my answers. And that would just make me way too neurotic and anxious. So it's just like, you do it as fast as you can and then you hand it in. And I always kind of thought, like, my first answer is my best answer. And as a splenic person, yeah, it's not surprising to me that I whipped through everything really, really quickly. But then stuff went sideways for me when I was in grade 7. When I was 11, that's when some of the bad stuff started to happen with my mom's boyfriend, who was 30. And school changed for me. Well, it's not like I got less intelligent, but my priorities totally changed. I didn't get recognition for being smart anymore. You know, my parents had other kids. My mom had another daughter 5 years after me, and she's on the autism spectrum. My dad had 2 boys when I was 8 and 10. So, you know, when I become a young teenager who's suddenly, everybody would have seen it as me, like, taking a turn. I went from being really good at school to not caring about school that much and wanting to be really social. You know, the report card started to say is easily distracted talking to her friends, which I would get in trouble for. You know, it's like everybody pushed me to be good in school, pay attention to school, pay attention to my academics. But that was just like, it was almost like this expectation that you would just do that. And there was literally zero support for it. And, you know, going through some of the trauma stuff at home, I didn't want to be home. I wanted to be with my friends. In fact, I didn't like my family. I didn't trust my family. My friends were what I wanted to be my family. I wanted to be with them. And so my priorities shifted a lot, and I was a lot less academic. And I mean, that is validating to what the psychiatrists are trying to say in terms of, like, trauma can create other problems for us. Trauma created problems for my functioning. But, you know, when I'm having a hard time functioning, it's not based on trauma. It's based on the fact that a lot of people don't know what being a quad left is. You know, that's only one part of my design that affects my functioning. I'm a projector. I'm a non-energy type. I have 7 undefined centers. Like, pressure affects my functioning. My not self affects my functioning. My energy type affects my functioning. But when I look at my quad left, when I think about, like, what is it to meet a quad left? You're meeting somebody with an active brain, okay? You're meeting someone with an active body. Like, when I meet a quad left, how do they present? They present as very busy thinkers, free movers, always wondering what the next step is, always wondering what the plan is. And then there's this focus view where we really get, like, pulled into things. If I had just learned that I have an active brain and this is what it feels like, that I have an active body and this is how it needs to move, that I have a strategic mind and this is how it's going to process, that I have a focus view and this is what it's going to pay attention to. Like, just that explained so much about what it actually feels like to be me and how to structure things or recognize things that are going to feel really good for me to just exist around. You know, you can give me the nicest house on the planet, but if I don't understand how my brain and body and mind and perspective work, I'm not going to enjoy being me in this beautiful house. I realized that in general, it kind of sounds like what I'm talking about is mental health. But that's limiting, right? Like, the mental health part feels like the brain and mind. It was almost like I wasn't going to sort out the mental health part without all of it. Like, my active body plays such an integral role in my functioning. And if I was too literal about mechanics, I would have just thought like, you're a non-energy type and you're supposed to go be horizontal after 3 hours of effort in a day. But if I did that, if I just went and laid down after 3 hours of effort, I would hate my brain. It would, oh man. When I think about like, what is torture for me? What is genuine torture for me? It's being stuck in my own brain. And yet at the same time, that's also like the ideal place of pleasure for me. This is a very weird, contradicting thing to say. If I have to be alone in my brain without any kind of stimulation, it's simultaneously boring and overwhelming. I can't imagine anything worse than being stuck in like isolation. Whenever I watch crime shows and I think of people that are like in jail, in like solitude, in isolation, that would drive me crazy. Like I would go, like crazy is a fear that I think that I have. I would go crazy. I would not like to be in my own mind. And yet, I really love my brain. I really love being in my mind. Sometimes I want nothing more than the whole world to just turn off so that I can go explore this whole place that is my mind. But it needs something to chew on. It kind of like needs something to focus on. It needs something to be active with. It needs something to consume, to digest, you know? One of the most important understandings about my brain that I've come to understand, I've come to realize, is I fixate on things. And when I fixate on things, that means that I'm spending a lot of mental attention and bandwidth on something. And because I'm spending a lot of mental attention and bandwidth on something, it can create this illusion that the thing is important. And the reason that it feels important is because it's getting so much attention from me. But what I've come to learn is that I pay attention to things. I chew on things. Just because I'm chewing on it doesn't necessarily mean it's super important. I'm somebody who naturally fixates. So I've come up with this phrase that I need a new stick of gum. I need something to chew on. You know, let's say I get into an argument with somebody. And I think and 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 think on this argument. And I think that this argument is so important. And I start to think about like how it's going to affect like my whole life and my direction and all of these things. And then it feels really big and really overwhelming. And because it's taking so much bandwidth, I'm giving it too much credit. I'm giving it too much importance. Whereas if somebody can pull me off that topic, distract me, give me a new stick of gum and get me to chew on something else, then I'll fixate on that thing instead. And what that has helped me realize is that just because I'm fixated on something doesn't actually mean it's important. You know, I don't need to get totally sucked into what happened in an argument. Maybe I really don't actually have to think about it at all. You know, maybe I just need to wait. Maybe I just need to. So if I go get another stick of gum and I chew on something else for a while, and then I come back to the original thing, you know, there's a good chance that the fixation is actually gone. And I realize it wasn't that important. I was just stuck on it. Okay. What did we talk about today? I think I'm ready to do a bit of a summary, if you're still with me. You would have found this podcast interesting, informative, supportive, if you are someone with an active brain, if you are someone with an active body, if you're someone with a strategic mind, if you're someone with focused view. On top of that, if you are someone who is wondering if you have ADHD, you know, I've likely just given you a lot of food for thought from the human design side of the conversation. Now, my psychiatrist asked me if I was interested in medication. Like, was I there seeking medication? And I told her no. I said what I was seeking was understanding about how to structure my life to fit my functioning. You know, most people are trying to fit their functioning into this lifestyle that they have. But I do recognize that I feel quite blessed, fortunate, and also, like, it's not like this was just like, whoa, given to me. Like, I worked for this. I worked to make this a possibility in my life. I work from home. I only work with clients that I want to. I only work the hours that I want to. Like, there is very little in my life where I'm doing things that I don't want to do according to what somebody else has told me to do, according to somebody else's schedule or deliverables. Like, my life is set up the way that feels really, really good for me. And that's part of my goal, you know. If I couldn't set up my life in a way that feels good, I think I really would need medication as a type of support. And who knows, maybe I'll get to that place, or maybe I won't. But right now, my goal with the psychiatrist is to just continue to get support while I third line test out things that I think will work for me. And one of the things that I'm working with right now is my point system. And I will likely continue to figure out what doesn't work about it and innovate it and, you know, channel a surrender, come out with a better one. And I can tell that right now, even though it's not super easy for me to talk about this, I'm going to be talking about it a lot. Functioning has my focus. Functioning has my attention. Understanding human design and understanding each person's design in a way where helping them function. Like, I want people, it really doesn't matter to me if you get the nice house or the partner or what matters to me is that you feel like yourself, that you're experiencing your signature throughout all of this. And the more that I'm able to make sense of this, I feel more supported. I feel more successful. I feel like it's getting easier to be me. And the more that I understand me, the more easy it's getting to, like, ask for help, ask for the support that I need. Yeah. This felt really good. This felt really, really good. I hope you got something of value out of this. I would love to have more conversations like this, but with other people who have questions about their own functioning. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Thanks for hanging out. If you want more of me, you can find me at www.samzagar.com or on Instagram @samzagar. See you next time.